for any healthcare profession where the interaction is actually the important thing, not the intervention. So we talk about a healthcare profession which is like talk therapy or touch therapy, physical therapy. It's the interaction more than the intervention that matters for outcomes, right? For any such healthcare profession, I think that subjective-objective division is bound to create confusion, because there are not just two kinds of information salient in this moment. There are three. There is patient subjective, there is practitioner subjective, and there is objective. Each of them can be rigorous and valuable kinds of information, but they're different kinds of information, and we need to be clear about that so that we don't avoid, so that we avoid trying to use objective language to describe something which is actually practitioner subjective, right? So, what does it mean? Patient subjective is the phenomena that is entering into the awareness of the patient, right? A valid kind of information. So, patient, what are you feeling right now? I know I've just been talking, so maybe you're just feeling a bunch of hot air.
No, I've been noticing how as soon as you start listening to my occiput that it started shifting my pelvis, and that's what's been sort of capturing my attention.
Interesting.
And particularly like a flow down this leg, which is, tends to be like a constricted, congested place.
So,
and I'm having trouble like listening to what you're saying because I'm so relaxed.
Great.
Yeah.
That's also true for,
right.
Probably everyone is so hypnotized by my sonorous voice that you're so relaxed at this point. You notice what happens when the patient reports their subjective experience. That might cause me to be like, is the occiput really doing this, or is the pelvis really doing that? But ultimately, I can't argue with what my patient reports to me, right? Because it is fundamentally its own kind of information. It's patient subjective. Now, there is objective information, which is the kind of information that you are taking in right now. Or shall we say, suppose a third person was observing the session who was a trained healthcare provider. Maybe they were not trained in this particular kind of work, but there has to be objective information is the kind of information which everyone here would agree just happened, right? So if there is a change in breath rate and everyone was looking at the rise and fall of the sternum and said, you know what, we all agree there's a change in breath rate. We can call that objective. There's a change in the pallor of the skin, objective. A change in the functional range of motion. A change in some machine-based measure. All of us could agree. The problem we run into with interactive healthcare modalities, like talk therapy and touch therapy, is that leaves a heck of a lot out, doesn't it? Because how much of what's happening right now is really just, is neither objective nor patient subjective. It is practitioner subjective. It's my experience of palpation. It is the questions I'm asking of this system. So then you get into generations of body workers trying their best to show you how to do what they do, right? And you say, boy, you've got some fancy magical skills. Tell me how you do what you do. And then the teacher says, oh, okay, how do I do what I do? Well, okay, you get yourself here, you know, table's at the right height, feet on the ground, you're grounded, you're poised, you find the right distance. And then what? Everything I say next is me sharing with you my artful hallucinations, right? It's sharing with you my intent. It's sharing with you the questions I'm asking of the body. And it's sharing with you the things that are coming into my direct experience. There's nothing wrong with that. Where we get confused is when I, the teacher, or me, the practitioner, wants to legitimate or solidify the information by pretending like it's objective, right? So if I say, I'm noticing a right side bend at the sphenobasilar junction, right? What that means is I'm feeling there's a little less space on the right side of the cranial base, you know? It feels a little tighter on that side, right? Now let me phrase it in a practitioner subjective way. When I place my hands on the back of the head and I cultivate the image of a cranial base, what I feel under my hands is more tension on the right side than the left, and a sense of compactness on that right side. You see, when I phrase it that way, I'm admitting to you my subjectivity, right? I may still be using as precise language as I can, but can you imagine that even if you weren't trained in craniosacral, you'd be like, okay, well, that person just described a very ornate hallucination, but I can't really argue with it. It's just his direct experience. Suppose I said, this patient is suffering from a classic sphenobasilar side bend. And then I put that in my chart, right? A couple of problems arise. Number one, does everyone in this room agree that there's a sphenobasilar side bend? I mean, it's obvious, right? So how could we expect the referring physician to understand what the heck I mean by that, right? So first of all, one problem is someone who isn't having the direct experience doesn't even know what I mean by that, right? Secondly, we will see later that palpation is not good at delivering objective information. It's very unreliable for that kind of information. So when I rely on palpation, even if it's very skilled palpation, and pretend to its objectivity, it's kind of a bait and switch. I'm saying, no. Here's what you need to do. You need to trust the fact that I sound like I know what I'm talking about, and that I'm an experienced teacher. And please appeal to my authority and my whatever vanishing threads of charisma I may have. Please use that to certify the value of what I'm feeling. And then suppose that I'm good enough at convincing you that there's this thing happening. Then all of you say, oh, I want to learn that kind of magic. And then it gets into the status competition. Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Are you feeling it? Are you feeling it? So everyone's sitting there at the table being like, oh, I wish I could feel it. When it may well be that our practitioner subjective experience is always going to be a little bit different, right? Now it's interesting to notice where things intersect. Where does the patient's subjectivity interact with mine? But boy, it avoids a lot of confusion if we just admit to it as the first place, right? So when early in my career I published a case report doing it as a massage therapist, I was attempting to write that case report in the tradition of manual therapy literature that I had been reading, which is osteopathic and chiropractic and physical therapy, right? I've been reading a bunch of literature in those fields, and those fields are run through with erroneous attempts to portray practitioner subjective information as objective. Run through with it. It's part of our tradition. So then I said in that case report, it was a patient with thoracic outlet syndrome, and I said, in the first through the sixth sessions, the anterior scalene displayed abnormal hypertonicity, and on the seventh session, it normalized. Right? Can you hear how I was constructing the sentence to sound like a machine had measured it, right? Mm-hmm. Or to sound like everyone who put their hands on that neck would automatically arrive at the same conclusion, right? And if I were rewriting that sentence now in that new frame, I would say this, and I would say this in a research article. I would say, in the first through the sixth sessions, when palpating for the anterior scalene, I felt it to be abnormally hypertoned. And on the seventh session, I could no longer feel that. Right? Or I felt it to normalize. I would put me back into the story. And that would be more honest. Because I would leave space for someone else to have a different experience, and I would leave space for there to be a different mechanistic explanation there, right? So if I say, I felt the anterior scalene to normalize its tone, I'm leaving a layer of space for other things to account for. Maybe the platysma muscle changed its tone and not the anterior scalene. Maybe the collarbone became more mobile. Maybe the smooth muscle in the skin. I don't actually know that it was the anterior scalene. All I know is that when I visualized the anterior scalene, I felt something change. That's honest. And in a sense, that's irrefutable. It's what I felt, right? What's entirely refutable is my interpretation of what objectively happened. So as we go through the rest of today, we're going to just play with inserting that layer of playful humility, and we're going to try to sort the phenomena that transpire in a craniosacral session into those three buckets: patient subjective, practitioner subjective, objective, what everyone could agree happened.